Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of On The Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 38 today. We are looking back at the Qatar Grand Prix, the sprint weekend that just happened in Qatar, and we'll be looking ahead to the season finale in Abu Dhabi. I'm your host, Adrian. Joining me as ever is my co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, it's a bit of a sad one, this one, because we're nearing the end of a great season. But hey, there's another season coming up in a few months' time, and what a better way to end off a few careers and a few teams' careers with a few drivers than in Abu Dhabi.
Exactly. Abu Dhabi's become a bit of a staple, really, hasn't it, for the last race of the season? Yeah, I think there's positives and negatives to look at it. I think from my point of view, I'm very much looking forward to next season where hopefully there'll be a mixed fortune for my driver. But yeah, as it is, I think it'll be an interesting season next season.
Think about it. We're both going to be Ferrari fans next season. And that's obviously not happened. We've obviously had opposing views in the 4 seasons that we've had of this podcast, and this time next season we'll have hopefully similar views. But that's obviously next season. On this episode of On the Grid, we've got a special guest. We thought we'd have a special guest last week, but we didn't. So we've moved it to this week. Joining us, Terry Widdows, Coffee Corner Motorsport. How are you, Terry? Are you looking forward to the final race of the season?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I am looking forward to it. Like yourselves, it's a mixed bag, isn't it, coming to the end of the season? But it's also an opportunity to have a bit of a rest and recharge. I'm not going to lie, it's been a long, tiring season, that's for sure. But it's been good. It's been a change from last year, and there's been some exciting stuff, and obviously still some things to sort out this weekend as well.
Yeah, for you, most definitely, it's been a tiring season. I have kept tabs on all your social medias, and it has been, compared to ourselves, where we're very much, I wouldn't say a startup, but like very much negotiating things. For yourself, it's a lot of doing things, a lot of doing this, that, other. It's a massive building block. For people that may not know what you do, could you give us a brief background, what you do, and how you got into F1 as well, really?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a weird way into content creation. So I'm a stay-at-home carer. We've got 4 disabled children. So a few years back, about 5, 6 years ago, I gave up work to look after them full time. I've been a Formula One fan for pretty much all my life. I used to watch it. Sat with my dad on a Sunday, so we're going back to Ayrton Senna days, Prost days, all those sort of things. So I've always been a fan, and I fell into content creation as a way to sort of engage with people and talk to people. Just because in between the care needs, you're up all night, you're scrolling through social media, got a bit annoyed, if I'm honest, with news about it not being right and about factual, and then decided to do my own channel. So that's what I created. So I created Coffee Corn on the basis of just bringing news, and it's now in its 3rd year, and it's kind of just snowballed and got bigger and bigger and bigger as more people have very kindly jumped on board and supported it and shared it, and it's just grown and grown and grown. So yeah, that's my side into content creation. It's something I do very much as a stress reliever in between caring for our children, and very much a hobby, but one I really enjoy, and I've had some fantastic opportunities from it, so it's been great.
And a question that's kind of on my mind: how many cups of coffee have you had?
I just done a post about how many views all of my posts have reached, and I reckon there's got to be about 1 million cups of coffee. I drink coffee far too much, almost to the point now I don't think it actually affects me. So I certainly don't get a caffeine rush from it anymore. So there's far too much coffee being drunk in our house.
Well, there we go then. Let's go into our average driver ratings. Let's start with P1 man and winner in Qatar, Max Verstappen. So if we look at his weekend on overall, sprint shootout P6. In the sprint, he finished P8 and then qualified on pole, but got pole stripped off him. I don't know, in an unjust way. I don't know. It can be seen either way, really. But George Russell was propelled into pole position with Max Verstappen starting second, but Max inevitably still won the race. I've settled with a 9 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. I think if we're looking on a scale of a whole weekend, It's two complete polar opposites. The sprint was just nowhere to be seen for Max Verstappen. He was actually quite a bit off the pace of obviously the Ferraris, the McLarens, and then George Russell. But then if you look at the actual race, it's once again, like I say, a complete polar opposite to what happened a day prior in the sprint. So I've given him a 9 out of 10. I mean, it's for if you're looking at a race perspective, it's pretty much a perfect race, but it's not an ideal Max Verstappen weekend where he's been dominating every kind of session, but he's not been able to do that. I think with the Red Bull car kind of being lacking. But I've given him a 9 out of 10. A 9 out of 10. I think he's still had a good weekend, but just maybe a little bit of fine tuning needed in the sprints. Ethan, your rating for Max Verstappen?
I've gone for a 10 out of 10. I don't think he really should have won in Qatar. So I think to do that is an exceptional effort. I personally, I don't agree with the grid penalty because I think, it's on a cool down lap. There's no real issue there. They're both on a cool down lap. But I think giving him a one-place grid penalty is absolutely ridiculous. It's never been done in the history of the sport. It's an absolute shambles. And I guarantee the only reason it was one place is because Russell was P2. If you had like Norris or Leclerc or anybody else in second, he probably would have got away without a penalty. But because it was Russell and Russell was a car impacted, I don't know whether that played in impact, but it's a stupid decision. But Verstappen was dominant throughout the race and I think deserves 10 out of 10.
Terry, on to your views of Max Verstappen's weekend?
I had him as an 8, so quite similar, only basically because of the sprint performance. I must say the Red Bull team did an absolutely awesome job to get that car, back after the setup apart from him when they lifted it after the sprint, because after the sprint race, it didn't look like he was going to be in competition, did it, even with Max driving it? But they did a great job with whatever setups they put on it. I'm with Ethan. I don't think it was a penalty. I've never seen a grid pace penalty, and I've certainly never seen one on 2 cooldown laps, which has no impact on anything. So I think that George played on it quite a bit. I think he went looking for the penalty, and for whatever reason, the stewards fell for it. So, as we've seen from the press conferences today, there's still some fallout from it. In fact, quite a big bit of fallout. But yeah, for me, race-wise was brilliant. I think the sprint was just kind of not there or thereabouts. But then I think a lot of that was to do with the setup more than Max himself, if I'm honest.
On to P2 man Charles Leclerc, who was very fortunate to finish P2, may I admit, putting my Ferrari hat off. Putting my Ferrari hat back on, if you look at his race weekend as a whole, sprint shootout 5th, a sprint 5th, qualified 5th, he may as well have finished 5th, and it would have been a decent weekend. But he finished 2nd, gaining valuable points for Ferrari. I don't think it's a similar weekend to Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen was dominant in the race, and Charles Leclerc was about the 4th, 5th kind of place range. Was it for not what happened with Lando Norris, etc. I've gone with an 8.5 out of 10. I've gone 0.5 lower than Max Verstappen. I still think Charles had a very good weekend. I don't think the Ferraris were fully on it. I think the McLarens and George Russell just edged it throughout the whole weekend, and then obviously Max Verstappen in the race. But I still think Charles Leclerc had a very, very good weekend. Obviously, the race strategy kind of paid off with them not pitting, and then he was able to hold on to P2 as Oscar Piastri wasn't able to get him in the end. So I've gone with an 8.5 out of 10. Ethan, your views?
I've gone slightly high. I've gone for a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a good performance from Charles Leclerc. Perhaps it's I think he's benefited a lot, obviously, from the Norris penalty. But I think that it was a good performance overall. Very solid, good pace, good race pace. And he comfortably held off Piastri towards the end there. Got a little bit fortunate with the timing of the safety car, I think. But overall, very solid performance. And yeah, he's made strides on Norris for P2 in the Drivers' Championship.
Terry, on to you?
Yeah, I went for an 8 only because I didn't give out any 0.5s, but I wouldn't disagree with anything that's been said. I think he had a strong race. You've got to be there, haven't you, to capitalise on anything. I know some people say he's fortunate for the penalty, but ultimately he drove a good race and put himself in that position. So yeah, I pretty much agree with him. I don't think he did a lot wrong over the course of the weekend at all.
On to P3 man, Oscar Piastri, who obviously got that race victory in the sprint. 2 years running now for Oscar Piastri. Was it gifted? Did Lando return the favour? He probably did. I mean, we obviously heard the conversation on the radio with Lando and his race engineer that there didn't need to be any switching of positions, but Lando Norris felt the courtesy of giving Oscar Piastri the Qatar Grand Prix sprint race victory. So if you look at Oscar Piastri's race weekend on a whole, sprint shootout P3, finished in first, and then qualified fourth and finished in third. I've actually gone with a 9 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. I think, yes, his P1 was sort of gifted, but I think he still had a very, very strong sprint. And I thought that in the race he was actually as well very strong as well. He wasn't on the pace of Lando Norris, of course, who was battling for the race lead. But I think on a whole, I think Oscar Piastri had a much stronger weekend than he has done in previous weeks, and he could gain a lot of confidence heading into Abu Dhabi from this performance. So I've gone with a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, completely agree with that. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 as well. I thought he was very good in the sprint. Obviously, it was nice of Norris to return the favour that Piastri gave to him in Brazil. And then in the race, he was very, very solid. I think that, on another day, he probably finishes P2, beats Leclerc, but overall, I think it was a return to form for Piastri after a few races where he's looked a little bit off it.
On to you, Terry?
Yeah, I'll go for the same. I mean, to be honest, I think if he hadn't got held up in the first part of the race, he might have been a bit more in contention. He seemed to get caught in a bit of traffic to start off with, but he drove really well in the sprint. Like you say, Lando, may have gifted in the win, but ultimately, he drove well enough to win that anyway. So yeah, definitely a good solid performance, like you say. Probably a welcome one for Oscar, and it kind of feels that since Lando's title challenge is gone, Oscar's kind of a bit more relieved that there's no sort of team orders as such. They can just race again, which I think takes a bit of pressure off for both of them as well. So I think that's good.
On to the first of the Mercedes, the front runner for the Mercedes team, George Russell. Sprint shootout second, sprint third, and then qualified second, but got moved on to pole and then finished fourth. I think it's a good weekend for George Russell. I've gone with an 8 out of 10 for George. Obviously he was very strong all weekend long. Obviously he got jumped at the start of a race, and that kind of saw his podium kind of unravel. And then from then on in, it was just kind of about maintaining the gap to obviously Pierre Gasly from the restart, which Gasly was caught fighting Carlos Sainz. But George, very good weekend. I don't think he kind of put a foot wrong, just maybe with his start, especially in the second phase where we saw Max Verstappen pull away and then Lando Norris jump him as well. I think that was kind of a turning point of George Russell's weekend. It was just a start. He just didn't have the start that he'd hoped for and kind of fell backwards. But yeah, still a very good race weekend for George Russell, so 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I've actually gone for a 9 out of 10 because I thought that, he'd done brilliant in his sprint, got onto the front row and then finished on the podium there. And then in the main race, obviously inherited pole position, but it was a storming lap to take P2. And then it was an unfortunate, he had that slow stop. I think he pitted the first out of the front runners. Obviously, he didn't have a great start, dropping down to P3, but then had a bit of an unfortunate stop, whereas I think it was about 7 seconds. So he lost a lot of time, got caught up in some traffic, and it meant that his progress was really inhibited. So I feel like a podium was on the cards here for Russell, but it just wasn't to be for him, unfortunately. So I've gone for a 9 out of 10. It's almost there, but he's just missed out on a couple of places there.
So you, Terry?
Yeah, I went for an 8. Similar to what you were both saying. I think he had a good race. He wasn't out by the stops on that point of view. I think the safety car was, can't remember the time in that one for George, but I don't think that worked in his favour either. But I think that it kind of showed the weakness of Mercedes, that it can be good over one lap, but in terms of race pace, if it's caught behind something stuck in traffic, it's really hard to get that extra bit of pace it needs to clear that traffic and challenge. So I think in terms of how he drove, he had a solid race. I think again, it's just the Mercedes just wasn't quite there enough to get him through that traffic and compete.
On to P5 man Pierre Gasly, who is the first 10 out of 10 for me this weekend. I've got multiple in here. But Pierre Gasly, P5, just an absolute heap of points that Alpine needed in their battle for P6 in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, if you even look at his sprint, obviously he qualified in P8, just missed out on the points, finishing P9, but then qualifying up in P11 and then making sixth places due to obviously what happened in front of him. But he was able to keep it ahead of the likes of Carlos Sainz and the rapid Fernando Alonso on the medium tyres. But it's another fantastic race weekend for Pierre Gasly, and one that, like I say, Alpine needed a lot in their battle for P6. So I think without a shadow of a doubt, this must go down as a very clear-cut 10 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Like Russell got a bit unlucky. I think Gasly got a bit fortunate. And he'd done a brilliant job getting up to P5. He was already having a good weekend. He qualified with sprint in 8th and finished 9th. Would have been disappointed to miss out on the final points position. Qualified in P11, but then to get P5, nobody was expecting that, and he's done a brilliant job for Alpine to get them some good points in the Constructors, and I think that's taken them back up to 6th, and given them a little bit of breathing room, given them about 5 points clear of Haas in 7th. So a great effort from him, and he's really shown some form towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I got him down as a 9. I think that the Alpine has been pretty good in terms of how it's been improved this season. I think Pierre has grown with that changes that they made. His form recently has been really good. Past few weeks he's been absolutely on it, and probably the main reason why Alpine have gone up in their points. So for me, definitely 9 out of 10, and an absolutely great weekend for him.
On to Carlos Sainz, who finished in P6 just behind Pierre Gasly. Obviously had that very, very unfortunate puncture where Alex Albon's wing mirror flew off down the start-finish straight, and he ran over the debris, which, in your guys' view, what do you think should have been done? Before we talk about Carlos Sainz and punctures and stuff, Ethan, what do you think should have been the measure in place to kind of take the debris off a track? What are your views on it? Should have been a virtual? Should have been a safety car? What do you think? What are your views on it?
It's got to be a safety car. It's in a dangerous position. It's at the only overtaking point on the track. It's got to be a safety car. It's cost Ferrari and Mercedes a lot of points by not calling the safety car. Obviously, Sainz and Hamilton getting the 2 penalties or the 2 punctures. So yes, it is shocking from the FIA. I think that they really needed to do something about that and bring out the safety car sooner and make a decision.
Terry, you have similar thoughts to Ethan.
I did a video on this and got some flack and some support on this one. For me, it's simple. If you can't get it under yellow flag, you look at a virtual safety car or a safety car. If they're saying, like they said the following day, that the gap on a virtual safety car meant that you couldn't do it, you call a safety car, you go through that chain of 4, and it doesn't take 4 laps to go through that chain of 4. Ultimately, that mirror didn't move. So first thought is, can a marshal get it? Yes or no? If they can't, next thing is call a virtual safety car. If that's not an option, you call a safety car. You don't need, those are your only options to it, really. The thought process of we're just going to leave it on there. Like Ethan said, it may not have been on the race line, it was on the overtake line. So any car that either overtook or even pulled out, if it's a back marker, was going to hit it. The whole world watching the feed could see it was going to get hit. We all sat there looking at it going, that mirror's going to get run over. Literally everybody was screaming the same thing. So I know it's a new race director. I don't think the FIA did any favours doubling down, saying that we don't normally call it safety car for debris, etc., etc. I think that was a mistake, and I think they should have just owned it and just gone, actually, if you can't get it, just go for the pit lane, like they did in the end. It didn't take, and in fact, when you think about it, it took longer to clear it up.
Let's talk about Carlos Sainz now. Obviously, he was one of the unfortunate beneficiaries of getting a puncture due to that debris. I marked him down as a 7.5 out of 10. I think he still had a very strong weekend. Obviously, in the sprint, he qualified fourth and finished fourth. His qualifying was a little bit off in seventh and then finishing in sixth, but I think he still had a very very strong race. It was just that puncture that kind of cost him a couple of points. He wasn't able to catch Gasly after the safety car restart, and then from that point onwards, I think he was dead set for sixth. I mean, um, he did have Fernando Alonso very much on him in seventh, but I think Fernando faded within the last couple of laps. So I've gone with a 7.5 out of 10.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. Solid, but nothing exceptional, really. I think there was an opportunity here for, especially with Norris's penalty, for Ferrari to take a big chunk out of McLaren's advantage. And unfortunately, they weren't able to make as many inroads as you would have thought. I think the Ferrari was quicker than the Mercedes. So, if you're getting P4 here for Sainz, then that's an extra 4 points they're gaining, which could be the difference because that's down to 15 points then instead of 19 that it is. So unfortunate for Sainz that he couldn't make the inroads on particularly Gasly, but he had a solid weekend overall.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. I've got him as a 7, so pretty similar. And like you say, I think you covered off his weekend with the comments. The punch was unlucky, but apart from that, he didn't do too much, and then just couldn't get back into it after that, could he really?
On to Fernando Alonso, and could it be a little return to form for Fernando because he's been quite unfortunate, but Aston Martin's been particularly nowhere to be seen really. Let's obviously in the sprint qualified 11th, finished 11th, and then qualified 8th to the main race and finished 7th. I've marked him down as a 9 out of 10. I think for an Aston Martin team who have been very hit and miss and more miss than hit this season, it's very very fortunate that they've got a driver like Fernando under the wheel. Obviously, he pitted twice. I believe he fitted the hards and then went, no, I don't want the hards. We'll go on to the mediums, and it worked a treat for him. He was able to stay in the points, finish 7th. Obviously had Joe Magnussen and Norris behind him, but comfortably held that 7th place just behind Carlos Sainz. And I think overall he had a very good weekend, something that we've not seen of Fernando of late. So I've gone with a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I've gone slightly low. I've gone for an 8 out of 10. But like you said, I do agree with that. He was very good this weekend. To put it up in P7 in an Aston Martin, which for a while now hasn't been fantastic, is a very good effort from him. So a return to form for Fernando. I'm sure he'll be looking forward to the end of the season and to really be able to kickstart next season if the car is improved.
Yeah, I had him down for 8. I think that it was quite a masterstroke to change the tyres again. He obviously wasn't happy with them hard ones, so these mediums gave him a bit of fighting chance, but couldn't hold on for the end. But I think overall it was, like you say, welcome return to form. It was good to see Aston Martin actually competing again after what's been quite a disappointing season for him, to be honest.
On to another 10 out of 10 performance from me. Zhou Guanyu, his first points of the season, Kick Sauber's first points of this season. Who would have thought we would be saying this? Kick Sauber in the points. I mean, me and Ethan both had him dead set to having 0 points for the whole season. But here comes Zhou Guanyu. A few upgrades to the car, and he pops up into the points. Obviously, his sprint wasn't ideal, qualifying 19th and finishing 19th. But then in the race, he goes through to Q2. He's on the brink of Q3 and then finishes 8th. I don't think I need to say much more. Well done, Zhou Guanyu. 10 out of 10. It was, I think, for me, it rounded off a very perfect weekend for Zhou Guanyu. I know he's still on the lookout for something, for an opportunity for next season, whether that be a reserve driver role that he's been rumoured with at Ferrari or whatnot. But I think it just shows the character and that if you put a decent enough car underneath Zhou Guanyu, he is actually able to finish in the points. So, yeah, 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It's a 10 out of 10 from me as well. And we've joked about how bad that Sauber's been all season, and see them getting not only points but P8 as well. It's a fantastic result for them. And a nice little parting gift as well for Joe, because obviously he's not being kept on at Sauber next season. So to get have a brilliant result like this in his penultimate race is brilliant for him, and good to see.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not give Joe 10 out of 10, can you, after that? Like you say, it's been a torrid season to be a Sauber driver, hasn't it? But I think that his professionalism has shone through this year, and I think he's probably shown that, like you say, with the right car, he's still an addition to somebody. So I'm hoping that he lands a role somewhere up and down the paddock. He's certainly a character I think deserves one, and kind of feel that if that car had been better, then actually they might have had potentially a more successful season and maybe even a different driver lineup going into next year.
It would have been a little bit silly if we did not give Driver of the Day a 10 out of 10. So I think it's only fair that we did give him a 10 out of 10 rating. Moving on to Kevin Magnussen, who also had a very strong race. Obviously was kind of helped out by Sergio Perez and Lando Norris to get himself into the points. But nevertheless, I've given him an 8 out of 10. I think Haas have been very strong. If you look overall, he sprint shootout 15th, sprint 10th, and then qualified 10th to finish 9th. For me, it was a very good weekend for Haas. And it's not usually the Haas driver that we see in the points. We usually see Nico Hulkenberg, but it's actually good to see Kevin Magnussen in the points instead of Nico Hulkenberg. Whilst he's not able to perform, Kevin Magnussen did. So, yeah. 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I've gone for an 8 out of 10 as well. I thought it was very solid from K-Mag. And again, like Joe, it's good to see him put in a good performance like this and get some solid points in what will turn out to be his penultimate race in Formula One. Yeah, I kind of echo everything he said. He's had a very good weekend the entire race. He went from 15th to 10th in the sprint race as well, let's not forget. Got some good points for Haas as well, kept them in the fight for P6 when Alpine have had another fantastic result. So positives to take for him, and yeah, 8 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I got him down as an 8. I'd pretty much echo what you've both said. I don't think there's much more to add to it. Good solid performance from him, and probably showing his worth as the season comes to an end, but valuable points for Haas, that's for sure.
On to P10 man Lando Norris. Very controversial here, because we could start a very massive debate talking about his 10-second his obviously stop and go penalty. And Ethan, let's begin with you. What did you make of it? We obviously spoke about George Russell being on the phone much earlier in this episode on Max Verstappen. This time, Max Verstappen's on the phone about Lando Norris. What did you make of it? How did you react to it? Were you watching the race live? I'm assuming you was. What were your reactions to what had gone off and what happened in front of you when you were watching the race?
So I actually wasn't watching live, but I was sort of following it on my phone, and I'm looking back at it after it happened. It is. I understand sort of the need for a penalty. Let's not debate that. Let's not say it was there was nothing wrong with it. Obviously, he was going too quickly under the yellow flag conditions. I just think that's 10 seconds stop and go penalty, which we haven't seen. I can't remember the last one we saw. It's been a good sort of 4 or 5 years since we've seen a penalty to that level. Because essentially it's a 35-second penalty, and usually you don't see anything above a 10-second penalty. So it's a very, very big penalty, and I don't really understand why it's so severe. Give him a 10, even 20-second penalty. But a drive-through 10-second stop and go penalty is insane.
Yeah, like you said, you just stopped yourself. It wasn't even a drive-through; it was a 10-second stop and go penalty. You mentioned there you don't see severe penalties. I mean, Esteban Ocon would beg to differ on that one. But Terry, what did you make of it? What did you make of the whole fiasco regarding Norris's penalty?
For me, it's more of the flag situation, because if you look at it, a double yellow flag penalty is a stop-go penalty. But it goes back to the question, was it the right flag in the first place? And for me, they're two very separate sort of debates. ultimately, he didn't slow during a double yellow flag, which is a penalty. It's a slam dunk penalty. But for me, it's whether or not it was an actual just a yellow flag incident. Bear in mind, as we just discussed, no one's going on the track, no one's retrieving that mirror. So ultimately, that's a yellow flag, not a double yellow flag. So I understand why they did it. What I don't understand still is why it was a double yellow flag in the first place, which they waived. So probably for me, it's more of that's where the error was rather than the penalty. The penalty had to match the crime, which in this case, unfortunately for Lando, under a double yellow flag, they class that as more severe. That's a stop go. But for me, I don't think it should ever have been double yellow flag conditions, if that makes sense.
Let's go on to Lando Norris's rating then. Like I say, I think he's been incredibly hard done by with a penalty. Had a very strong sprint, finishing second, obviously starting from pole, and then qualified third. Obviously got himself up to second past George Russell. Was battling with Max Verstappen, but then obviously he got dropped way down the order to the back of the grid, but was still able to make it into the points with the remaining laps that he did have. I've given him a 7 out of 10. I think he still had a very, very good weekend, just like I mentioned, very hard done by with a penalty. And I don't think he could have done much more in the race because of that penalty. So I've gone with a setup, a 7 out of 10.
I've actually gone for an 8 out of 10 for Lando Norris. I thought it was an unbelievable sprint performance. Obviously, he gave up the win in the end, but it only cost him a point. Qualified P3 and was looking very, very strong in P2 for the entire race before that penalty. You know, it's a small mistake, which is what's actually demoted it from a 9 to an 8. So I think realistically, a 10-second penalty or 15 seconds would have been fair. I just think that it's just so harsh a penalty for what it is. So an 8 out of 10 from me.
I went 7 purely because ultimately that yellow flag's down to him. Yeah, you should know better than to even if you just slightly lift and do it. So I'm a bit harsh maybe in terms of marking him down, but I think for me that he's lost a shed load of points there due to the fact that he just didn't just lift into it. So I get, all the confusion over flags and penalties and that thing, but ultimately he knows better not to drive flat out through a yellow flag situation, and that's on him, unfortunately, for me.
On to the drivers who finished just outside of the points. So on to Valtteri Bottas, who, once again, Sauber had a very, very strong weekend. Valtteri Bottas qualified 13th for the sprint, finished 12th, and then qualified 13th and finished 11th. I've gone one grade lower than Guan Yu Zhou. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas. I think, obviously, was very, very unlucky that a steaming Lando Norris was behind him and had to overtake him to steal that 1 point away from him. But yeah, again, I think he had a very, very strong weekend. I don't think it's on par of Zhou Guan Yu, purely on the basis Zhou finished 8th and inside the points, and Valtteri Bottas obviously finished just outside of the points. So yeah, I've settled with a 9 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas.
I've gone for an 8 for Valtteri Bottas. Very, very good performance, as you said. I just can't give him a 9 when Zhou's finished up in 8th. But yeah, like I said, it's unfortunate Bottas hasn't been able to get any points. But, in breaking news, he has claimed P22 in the Drivers' Championship, overtaking Logan Sargent. A massive victory for the Finn driver there. Excellent work.
I gave him an 8 as well. I think, like you say, with Joe having the same car and getting his performance, I think you can't put him near that sort of level. I know Lando can pass him, but even so, I think an 8's a good score. It's good performance from him. And yeah, congratulations on his championship move up. Obviously, with Jack doing this weekend, will that be 24 in the standings this year? If I remember rightly.
Oh dear. That's
what if he moves down again?
Let's not put him down. He's had a good weekend. Let's have optimism for Valtteri Bottas. He's a good driver around Abu Dhabi. Let's hope he finishes in the points. Fingers crossed. On to Lewis Hamilton. And what happened here? The crying, the whining of Lewis Hamilton. No, I don't want to finish. Retire the car. It's back again. He just can't catch a break, can he? Obviously, another driver that ran over the debris on a start finish straight, and another driver the yard puncture, which dropped him down the order. Not like Carlos Sainz, who dropped a few places, because I think obviously Hamilton was running a few places down from Carlos Sainz, so Carlos Sainz was able to still stay in the points. But of Hamilton's standards, this weekend was just a bit dismal, a bit all over the place. I mean, if you look at his sprint, qualified seventh, finished sixth, and then it started sixth for the race and finished 12th because of that puncture. Yeah, I marked him down. Ethan, shoot me if you think this is too low, but I've gone with a six. I just think that due to that puncture and due to the nature of how Hamilton was actually driving before that puncture, don't think he was anywhere near his optimal level. He's obviously even said that he thinks he's slow again. He's not the same Bono. It's not the same Lewis Hamilton. But yeah, this weekend, for the last couple of race weekends, I think Lewis Hamilton's fortunes have been a bit mishmashed. Obviously, he had the high of Vegas, but I think it's been up and down for Lewis Hamilton compared to when you look at George Russell. So yeah, I've settled with a six.
I'll go slightly higher. I'll go for a seven. I thought that, in the sprint, he'd done a solid performance and he was looking good in the race as well. I think he was up in about sixth at the time of the puncture. And like we said, I think the puncture wasn't his fault. It was absolute lunacy from the FIA not deciding to waive a safety car or a VSC. I don't think the VSC was able to be done, but a safety car. And he's paid the price for that. And then after that, I think, running out the points, he obviously got a penalty as well for speeding in the pit lane, which was an easy mistake to make. But overall, I thought that he looked all right. But, I think I think there's upgrades on Russell's car, which, they've only got one of, which obviously have gone to him rather than Hamilton, who's leaving the team, which you can understand from a Mercedes point of view. But it's an unfortunate way for this era to end.
Yeah, I mean, I went for a six. I think Lewis is struggling with the changeover. I think George is getting the rubber. I mean, we know that it's common practice when the driver's leaving. George will be getting all of the data. George will be getting all of the upgrades first. He'll be getting, what's good on that car, possibly knowing what's bad. Lewis will be getting frozen out now, which is just the normal way to play things. And I think, he's kind of just got that one eye now on the door, kind of wind it down, which feels like it's a big shame for the end of his Mercedes era to be like that. But I think he can't wait to park up that Mercedes, if I'm honest. And, like you say, he almost did a couple of times on the weekend, didn't he, for sure?
Now on to the two RBs, the two AlphaTauris, the two V-Carbs. Yuki Tsunoda in 13th and Liam Lawson in 14th. I've paired them. I've gone down the middle with the two of them. I've gone with 5 out of 10s. If you actually look at their sprints, Liam Lawson did start up in 10th but fell to 16th, as Yuki Tsunoda started 17th and stayed 17th. And then in the race, they were very anonymous. I don't think I can remember much of the two V-Carbs at all. So I've gone straight down the middle. 5 out of 10s, and it's not the weekend that RB wanted in their fight in the Constructors Championship. On mute, Ethan.
I thought I clicked it, but I didn't. I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda, as I was saying. Not a great weekend for RB. I think this was very much a missed opportunity. Not a great sprint from Tsunoda, and then in the race, he didn't really put any inroads on the top 10 out either. When you've got 5 cars retiring for a midfield team like RB, you'd hope, okay, maybe he can get sort of some decent points, maybe get a double points finish, especially when you've got someone like Perez in a Red Bull retiring from the race as well. So I think it's a missed opportunity. They're basically out of the race for P6, unless they have an absolutely fantastic weekend in Abu Dhabi, which I don't see happening. But at a time where Tsunoda and Lawson really needed a couple of good performances to stake their claim for that second Red Bull seat, maybe they've missed their boat.
Yeah, I went for 5 for both of them as well. I think the same thing. They've gone backwards recently. I know they've got some, sort of 2025 developments on the car. I don't think that's helping. They're getting a head start like they did last year by integrating those Red Bull parts early. But they've just fallen off recently when you kind of expected them. And when you got two drivers who are kind of going for like Red Bull seat, you kind of want to see them in amongst the action, in amongst the points. And they didn't look like they were going to treble. In fact, you kind of forgot they're still in the race, I think, this weekend. I think, like you said, we didn't really see or hear much about it, and they just kind of trundled around where they were, and that was it, really.
And then talking about trundling around, something happened to the next driver in the order, P15 man Alex Albon. Obviously had that clash with Stroll very, very early on, and I don't think he recovered since. Must have picked up some damage or something, or something should have probably happened to his car. Just not the weekend he would have hoped for. I've gone with a 5 out of 10. I think that it's been for Williams. They've just had not the rub of the green, and Alex Albon certainly has not had any luck at all. So yeah, 5 out of 10.
I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Alex Albon. He actually put in a decent performance in sprint qualifying, but slipped backwards. I think he suffered. He got it was his wing mirror that obviously fell off into the middle of the track, which I don't think was helping him too much towards the end of that race. But I think it's clear to see from these last 5 or 6 races that Williams have given up on 2024, and they're solely focused on the 2025 one. Obviously, they got Carlos Sainz coming into the team. I think it's an opportunity with 2 very, very solid drivers to make a charge forward and look to, take the fight forward to sort of the Alpines and RBs and Haas's. So there's an opportunity there next season with 2 very, very good drivers. So you don't blame them prioritising 2025.
Yeah, I've got him down as a 6. I think Williams is just a victim of not having enough parts. I think their cars are pretty much cobbled together with bits they can find. So I think that's compromising the setup and compromising the running of them and kind of limiting what they can do with it from a car point of view. I think they're just kind of surviving to the end of the season. And, I think a huge pat on the back for those Williams mechanics for actually getting those cars out there, because they've been having some sort of challenges with all the crashes they've been recently getting. So to still line up with 2 cars and be sort of semi-competitive, I think hats off to them. But I think, like you say, their focus has got to be next year now. It's going to be interesting for those 2 drivers, see what they can do. 2 drivers who expect probably better than what Williams are currently performing, which I think is going to be really interesting.
On to our first retiree that I've got in the order, which is Nico Hülkenberg. Finished inside the points in the sprint in P7. And then, obviously, like I say, qualified down in P18 and then retired from the race as he beached himself in the gravel from one of the safety car restarts. I've gone with a 6 for Nico. Points in the sprint. But I think that obviously he was involved. I believe he was involved in that lap one incident with Ocon and Colapinto, if I'm not mistaken. And then kind of, like I say, he was near the back, just running near the back, just chilling, similarly to Albon. So, yeah, I've gone with a 6. He had a very good sprint, but just his race was kind of nowhere, really.
I went for a 7 for Hulkenberg. Obviously, finished in P7 in the sprint, so that's kind of what's dragging his grade up. I think that he obviously made that mistake after the first safety car, which caused the second safety car, that and Perez. So you got to mark him down there, and he obviously qualified down in 18th. When obviously you see that the pace is there because of what Magnussen's done and what he done in the sprint. So a missed opportunity again, and they've gained 2 points in the sprint. But I think that Hulkenberg was up there fighting for the lower ends of the points. Maybe they could have limited the damage even more to Alpine. But a solid performance, great in the sprint, and that's the difficult thing about these sprint races. He's obviously done very well and then on the Sunday he's had an absolute shocker. But I've kind of found somewhere in the middle at 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I went with his 6 because of his sprint performance mainly. His race was one to forget. I don't think there's not much more I can add to what you 2 have already added on that one, but he was certainly good in the sprint race, so that's what dragged him up a bit for me, really.
On to our resident Mexican, Sergio Checo Perez, who On this podcast, we either give him a bad review or we give him an exceptional review, and it's more bad reviews than good reviews this season for Sergio Perez. In my notes, poor sprint, good quali, decent race until he spun out behind the safety car. And I mean, behind the safety car, he spun. I've gone down the middle. I've gone middle of the road. I've gone with a 5 out of 10. I think up until he spun out, he had a very, very good race, was running well inside of the points. But for, like we talk about over and over again, for a Red Bull driver, you should be performing well above those standards. And those standards for Sergio Perez are clearly beaching himself in the gravel, and end of a race in the pit lane. So yeah, I've gone 5 out of 10. He had a decent Saturday afternoon and then decent Sunday until obviously that accident. But yeah, it doesn't look good.
I think actually a 5 out of 10 is very generous there. I've gone for a 2 out of 10 for Sergio Perez. He's finished last in the sprint race after qualified 16th in the sprint. Obviously started from the pit lane. And then there was a stat going around that the safety car had a 0.15 second reaction time. Sergio Perez had a 4.5 second reaction time to the green light, overtaken by a rookie in his 7th race in Formula One. This is a guy who's been in the sport since 2011, by the way. And then in the race, do I need to say anything else? He's qualified in a decent position by his standards in 9th. He's then gone forward throughout the race and is sitting in a decent points position. No means spectacular when your teammate is leading the race by however many seconds. And then he goes and drives into the gravel, gets his car stuck, and costs the team however much to recover it into like the prize money. He is the reason that Red Bull haven't already won the Constructors title. And yeah, I don't have anything else to add. That's my rant over.
I went for a 4 based on that pit lane start, to be honest. Yeah, it was just shocking to see that picture of him just sat there, kind of like waiting. And you're like, what you waiting for, mate? Yeah, I mean his fortunes just haven't turned around at all, have they? Lots of speculation about his future, but like you say, he's definitely cost him the Constructors Championship, and there was nothing in this weekend that would make me think that you want to keep him as your second driver. That's for sure.
To be fair, that pit lane incident did slip my mind. I completely forgot about it. And how can you forget about something as comical as that happening? But onto Lance Stroll, and Ethan, I know you love Lance Stroll. And he's been in the wars again. This time with Alex Albon understeering or oversteering or whatever you want to say. He just rammed into the side of Alex Albon, heading into one of the corners. Yeah. I mean, overall, if you actually look at his weekend, sprint shootout 14th, sprint 13th, qualified 15th, and retired. I'm gonna go with 4. I think I'm being nice, to be fair, with most of these ratings. I think that especially after you shot down Sergio Perez, I feel like I'm being nice to everyone now. But yeah, I'm settling with a 4 out of 10 for Lance Stroll.
I'll only go one low. I'll go for a 3 out of 10. Yeah, stupidity at its finest. We've come to expect that from Lance Stroll. He actually done all right in the sprint. A little bit behind his teammate, but not too far. And then obviously 15th, qualified in 15th, 7 places below Alonso. And then didn't finish. I think it was due to the damage that caused with that incident, Albon, that caused him to retire. So yeah, he's the master of his own destruction yet again.
Yeah, I went for a 4. There's not a lot I can add really. I think it's been covered. A bit like Checo. It's a driver who you hope and expect will turn a corner at some point, and every race kind of keeps leaving you the same as what you thought on the previous race, to be honest.
On to the final 2 drivers in our driver ratings who both ended their race after the first corner. It is Franco Colapinto and Esteban Ocon. For Franco, I've gone with a 4. Purely on the basis, obviously, we're talking about Ola Williams here, but we're talking about yet another accident involving Franco Colapinto. Ethan actually mentioned this a few episodes ago, where he said that he thought that Williams were supposed to be replacing a driver that crashes a lot with a safe driver. This is yet again another incident for Franco Colapinto where he's costing the team a hell of a lot of money. But like I mentioned, I've gone with a 4 out of 10 for Franco Colapinto, and for Esteban Ocon, I've gone straight down the middle with a 5 out of 10. He had a decent sprint. Obviously, qualified in 18th, made up 4 places to finish 14th. And then his qualifying was just abysmal, and obviously retired after the first lap. So yeah, 4 for Franco Colapinto and 5 for Esteban Ocon.
So for me, for Franco Colapinto, I've also gone for a 4 out of 10. Wasn't his weekend. And unfortunately, he kind of, as we said before, he needed that to have a solid 8 races to be in with their shout of getting a seat next season, which seems to be dissipating. I still think he'll do a good job with Williams as a reserve driver. And as I said before, I'm sure that there'll be a clause in Carlos Sainz's contract that says if one of the big teams come knocking, he's allowed to go, despite the fact I think he's got like a 3-year contract. So it is a 4 out of 10 for Colapinto. Unfortunate, but I don't think there was much wrong. I think the turn 1 incident between him and Ocon was just a lap 1 incident, so I'm not going to put blame on either one of them. But I have gone for 4 for both of them actually, so I've gone for 4 for Esteban Ocon as well.
Yeah, I went for a 4 for both. I think that Franco's probably done himself out of a drive for next season with the past couple of races and the incidents. Not all his fault, I must add. He's definitely been on the bad luck side of some of them as well. But I think that with the amount of money that Williams have been asking for to release him, and coupled with the past couple of races, I think that's kind of done him out of his seat anywhere else. But like I say, I think he's definitely a talent which is going to come back on the grid, and I think that one that Williams have probably done the right thing by making sure they've locked him down and kept him with the talk of obviously Carlos's contract, bigger teams come in, grid shake up in a couple of years. He's definitely one for the future. So I think it'd be a bit harsh to say it's his fault. But I think he's definitely been a victim recently of a couple of crashes which have gone against him in terms of getting him on the grid next year.
Time to quickly review our Qatar Grand Prix weekend predictions. Ethan, first and foremost, how did you get on in your star predictions? And then we'll look at the whole predictions for the sprint shootout, sprint, qualifying and the race a little bit later on. But how did you get on in your star predictions?
Well, this is probably actually the only bright spot, is that I had McLaren double podium. Obviously, they got double podium in the sprint race. I had Yuki Tsunoda points as well, which didn't come out. But, 50% is better than how many points I got in the actual predictions.
Similar fortune for myself, really. For my first star predictions, I put Ferrari to top the Constructors' Championship. A bit of a hopeful one, I think, looking after especially the sprint performance and the qualifying performance, but then obviously made a few inroads in the race. But then I had as my second star predictions, I had Haas points, and they achieved it in both races. So can I class that as double points in a sense? No? Okay. All right. I'll take the one anyway. Heading into our predictions for the whole weekend overall. So I got a whopping 2 out of 20. Abysmal weekend once again. I'm an Alex Albon at the moment. I'm not getting the rub of the green at all. My only correct predictions were George Russell to get second in the sprint shootout and Lando Norris to qualify third for the race. Apart from that, I was nowhere. So for the sprint, I said Charles Leclerc would get pole with George Russell in second and Lando Norris in third, Max Verstappen in fourth and Carlos Sainz in fifth. In the sprint, I said Lando Norris would finish top of the pile, which he should have done. And why didn't you, Lando? He decided to be nice to his teammate and return the favour for Brazil. So I didn't get that one. I said Charles would finish second with Max in third. George and Carlos rounding off the top 5. For qualifying, I had Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz for a front row Ferrari lockout, with Lando Norris, as I said, correctly predicted in third, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen in fourth and fifth, and then in the race, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, and Oscar Piastri. None of those came through. So, like I mentioned, 2 out of 20. Another poor weekend for myself.
Yeah, so I also got 2 out of 20. So I had Oscar Piastri's sprint race victory and a Charles Leclerc second place in the race. And that was my only points. So in sprint qualifying, I had Piastri, Sainz, Leclerc, Norris and Russell. I think I got 4 out of 5 correct there, just in the wrong order. Sprint race obviously had Piastri to win, and then Sainz, Norris, Leclerc, Russell. For qualifying, I had Leclerc on pole with Piastri, Sainz, Verstappen, and Norris. And then in the race, I had Piastri to take the victory, Leclerc second, which I got the point for, then Norris, Sainz, and Verstappen.
Let's move on to a little bit of news and include Terry back in the conversation after we've had a little bit of a predictions shocker between myself and Ethan. So the first bit of news, let's talk about the Alpine situation. With Esteban Ocon departing Alpine for the last race of the season, allowing Jack Doohan to step into the Alpine for Abu Dhabi. Terry, what have you found of the situation? We've obviously seen that Esteban Ocon has been relieved of his duties by Alpine, and he's set to be one of the drivers for Haas in a post-season test. What have you made of the situation? Does this allow Alpine to get a little bit of a taste of what Jack Doohan is about? But also, do you think that Esteban Ocon has slightly been hard done by in this situation?
Yeah, I think you're right on both counts. I think definitely it lets them get a look at Jack in a race situation, which I know there's been sort of warm speculation about Franco going there, mainly due to a couple of photos of Franco talking to Flavio Briatore that kind of really was any substance. So I'm not a firm believer of that one. But I think it gives an opportunity to do Jack. I think that Esteban's been really harshly done by. He kind of feels like he's been criticised for no real reason in terms of leaving him out. It certainly wasn't a decision that was made before he agreed to do the Haas test. If you listen to both his statement and then you listen to Ayo Komatsu today, he said that they didn't know that was a part of it. So it seems like Alpine have kind of forced something at the last minute to manoeuvre it to get him in, which I kind of feel harsh because I think he's not done nothing to have that professionalism questioned. And it kind of feels that's what Alpine are doing in a roundabout way. Obviously, they're deep in that fight with Haas. Lots of speculation over whether or not Esteban's going to put in 100% is what they're saying, but behind the scenes. But for me, it's kind of, I think he would have wanted to get points and go out on a high and probably secure it rather than the other way around. And it kind of feels like he's not had that opportunity to do that. So I feel that this has got a bit of a Flavio look to it in terms of manoeuvring a deal, which, fans of Flavio Briatore, if there are any, won't be surprised at that.
Ethan, what are your views on Esteban Ocon's departure and kind of Jack Doohan's premature entrance into Alpine?
I think it's unfortunate for Esteban Ocon. Obviously, he's been there for 5 years. He's got them the team's only victory in Formula One. Let's not forget that. So for it to end in this way is very unfortunate. I think he deserves to be treated with a little bit more class than it's been shown. So, but also for Jack Doohan as well. Obviously, it's a good experience for him. It gives him that taste with little pressure. But his home race, the first race of the next season, is Australia. It would have been his first race in Formula One, his home Grand Prix. It would have been a nice bit of poetry. But as it is, he has got a meaningless race in Abu Dhabi as his first race in Formula One. So it's unfortunate for Ocon, especially when you consider Sainz is racing for Ferrari and doing the postseason testing for Williams. So I think it's just Alpine being difficult and holding a grudge.
Talking about race experiences, let's round off this newsy bit with a couple of rookies stepping into F1 machinery for FP1. So Ayumu Iwasa is set to step up at RB in FP1, but also big brother business, Charles Leclerc has been able to secure Arthur Leclerc an FP1 session, and it's actually the first time brothers participate together in an F1 session. Ethan, do you think very much that Big Brother has been on the phone to anyone and everyone at Ferrari securing this sort of opportunity for Arthur Leclerc? Because I mean, Arthur was an F2 a season or two ago, but he's kind of been doing his own thing, and I think he's obviously in and around the Ferrari scene. But were you expecting him to step into the Ferrari?
No, I was not personally, but I think it's the first session as teammates because obviously there's been some brothers that have raced at the same time, like most famously the Schumachers. So it's the first time they've been as teammates in a session. But yeah, I think Charles Leclerc has used a little bit of his sway at Ferrari, a bit of his influence to get his brother a practice session. But given it's only a P1 session, it doesn't really matter too much. But I think it'll be a nice moment for them to race as Ferrari teammates.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't, and it clearly state that clause, teammates. I didn't say that word, but thank you for clarifying that. Let's move on to F2 quickly before we round off the episode with our predictions. Um, let's look at the qualifying in the Qatar Grand Prix. So Paul Aaron secured pole position ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto, the championship leader, over 3/10 of an advantage between the two, between Paul Aaron and Gabriel Bortoleto. Victor Martins was third, Dino Beganovic on debut fourth, Richard Ashour on his MP Motorsport return was fifth, Jack Crawford sixth, and then Kushmani seventh, Oliver Goethe in eighth, Isaac Hadjar in ninth, and Ollie Behrman in 10th. Ollie Behrman did start on reverse grid pole and was able to get the victory, with Crawford and Ashour rounding off the podium places. And then in the feature race, it was Paul Aaron, Bortoleto, and Martins in the top three. But the finishing order did actually see Isaac Hadjar make it all the way to ninth to finish second ahead of his championship rival, Gabriel Bortoleto, who finished third, with Paul Aaron gaining the race victory. In the championship, it's 0.5, 0.5 of a point, half a point in the F2 championship. Terry, do you keep tabs on Formula 2? And especially with all these three drivers being in and around the F1 ranks, Bortoleto confirmed with Kick Sauber, Paul Aaron confirmed as Alpine reserve driver, and Isaac Hadjar, as he alluded to in his press conference after the feature race, he could be on his way to Formula 1 as well in some sense. What do you make of this championship battle? Which way could it go?
I don't follow F2 as close as I should do because I don't find the time for it. I find it really, I'm one of these people, if I can't invest everything into it, I just dabble in it. But I've been keeping a close eye on this. I did actually meet Isaac literally a few weeks ago at a charity event. Really sound guy. He was doing some sim racing. Absolutely awesome to watch him sim racing. It was a charity event for Chris McCarthy. So watching firsthand these drivers, even at that level, doing sim racing with someone else. So I mean, what can you ask for a championship that goes down to the wire? I'm going to go Isaac purely because I think he might get the momentum with him, but I do think that it might be the last time we see him in F2 based on that press conference as well. So, but in terms of the racing, it's been superb racing for him this year.
Ethan, which way are you going?
That's a difficult one. I'm not too sure. I'm going to sit on the fence quite firmly here and not take a side.
That's so boring. Please pick a side. I don't want this boring sitting on the fence. Please
Go
pick
on
a
then,
side.
you pick a side then.
Bortoleto.
All right, I'll go with Hadjar to be different.
Go the opposite side of the fence.
That's fine. 2v1, I'll take it. But it will be very interesting to see what happens in Abu Dhabi. Let's round off the episode with our predictions. So Terry, if you want to start with your 2-star predictions, what are you hoping could happen in Abu Dhabi?
I'm hoping for a McLaren Constructors Championship. I think they're going to be rapid around here. And I want to see Bottas in the points.
Ethan, what about yourself?
So I have gone for it's not loading. I've gone for no DNFs in the race, and I've gone for Haas to get P6 in the Constructors.
So mine's kind of interlinked with yours, Ethan, regarding Haas. I've gone with Kevin Magnussen points. I think that he will help Haas secure P6 in the Constructors. And I've gone with something for you, Ethan. Last race for Mercedes. What a way for him to bow out. Lewis Hamilton with a podium finish. I think that Lewis Hamilton could be on for a podium. But let me conclude with my qualifying and race predictions. So for the race, I've actually gone with a Charles Leclerc pole position. I think that Ferrari need everything they can to finish top of the Constructors' Championship, and a Charles Leclerc pole would not go amiss. I've gone with Lewis Hamilton in second and Lando Norris in third, with Max Verstappen fourth and Carlos Sainz in fifth. And for the race, I've actually gone for a Lando Norris victory. I think that McLaren are just going to edge Ferrari. Charles Leclerc in second, Lewis Hamilton in third, Carlos Sainz in fourth, and Max Verstappen in fifth. For the final time this season, Ethan, what are your predictions?
So I've gone for Lando Norris to claim pole, Max Verstappen alongside him, George Russell in third, continue a good spell of qualifying for him, and then Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri. And then for the race, I've gone for Norris to clinch the victory, with Leclerc second, Verstappen third, Piastri fourth, and Sainz fifth. However, I wouldn't be objected to Ferrari claiming the Constructors' Championship because, being a Lewis Hamilton fan, I think it'd be very nice to see him go into the Constructors' Champions.
Terry, on to yourself.
Oh, do you know what? I'm gonna sit on the fence and keep. I think we're gonna get Lando win. I think Matt second, and then I think Charles will get third. Fourth and fifth, I think it's going to be a bit of a toss-up. I want to see Lewis up there for purely, sentimental value. And then fifth, I think Oscar's going to get it in terms of the race itself.
Okay, that rounds off the episode of On the Grid Podcast. Thank you, Terry, for joining us. Terry, where can the good people of On the Grid Podcast find you?
Pretty simple. Coffee Corner Motorsport across all social media channels. Same handle across all of them. So just search that and you'll find me there.
Lovely. Like I mentioned, we'll be back next weekend reviewing the season finale in Abu Dhabi. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.